It's incredibly rare for a single silent object to just fundamentally change the way the entire human race talks and thinks and acts.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because usually, when we think of global communication, we think of the internet or smartphones or these massive broadcast networks. But today, we are looking at a simple looped piece of fabric.
Right. Just a soft pink ribbon.
Exactly. A soft pink ribbon that has somehow managed to, well, completely rewrite the rules of modern healthcare, corporate policy, and even how we process our own grief.
It really is an unparalleled phenomenon,
Yeah.
especially when you study the infrastructure behind it.
Yeah, and we are jumping right into our source material today. It's this fascinating collection of insights that culminates in the doculate, the pink ribbon, a global legacy of hope and resilience. And our mission for you on this deep dive is to uncover how this visual marker evolved from, a quiet grassroots whisper into one of the most recognized global symbols in human history.
Because if you look at the visual history, you see these early, almost hand-drawn grassroots posters. And they're slowly transforming year by year into these massive, highly coordinated global medical campaigns. I
Right.
mean, we are exploring something that goes far beyond a piece of clothing or like a sticker on a window. This ribbon is a vehicle for a massive cultural shift. It bridged geographic, linguistic, and cultural divides to unify people under a single urgent cause. It completely changed the landscape of medical advocacy.
Okay, let's unpack this because almost everyone listening to us right now has seen this ribbon. You see it pinned to lapels, printed on the side of product packaging, painted onto athletic fields in the fall.
It is completely ubiquitous.
It really is. But what becomes incredibly clear when you dive into the data is that, well, very few people understand the massive multi-layered architecture of advocacy, medical research, and memorialization that actually stands behind it. We see the pink, but we don't always see the engine driving it.
And that architecture is exactly what makes the symbol powerful. It's frankly what separates it from just a simple marketing trend.
Right. It's not just a logo.
Exactly. Without the underlying infrastructure, it is literally just a color. But with the infrastructure, it becomes an active tool for survival. The pink ribbon has transcended its original role to become this comprehensive ecosystem of education, early detection protocols, and survivorship networks.
So to really understand how that ecosystem was built, we have to go back to the beginning, right? To the era of breaking the silence, because this didn't just emerge overnight.
No, not at all.
It wasn't born in some global corporate boardroom as a ready-made, focus-grouped icon. It started as a grassroots effort to bring attention to a disease that for a very long time was discussed only in hushed tones.
Yeah, hushed tones is almost putting it mildly.
Right, and I want to pause on that reality for a second. Imagine the early days of a breast cancer diagnosis as being trapped in a dark, locked room. The medical establishment essentially built that room. The fear is amplified entirely because you can't see what you're dealing with, and you feel entirely alone because you can't hear anyone else in the room with you.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
And the pink ribbon, in its earliest iteration, was the key that finally unlocked that door and let the light in. It encouraged women to speak openly, to look around and realize, hey, they were not alone.
Well, what's fascinating here is that while the locked room analogy captures the isolation perfectly, I would argue the medical establishment didn't just build the room. Society at large built the soundproofing.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
We have to look at the psychological landscape of the mid to late 20th century. Breast cancer carried an immense amount of societal stigma. It involved the female anatomy, which was heavily scrutinized and often just completely taboo in public discourse.
Right, you just didn't talk about it.
Exactly. Because of that, it wasn't discussed openly in the public square. Families whispered about it behind closed doors. And that silence wasn't just emotionally damaging, it was biologically dangerous.
Biologically dangerous because...
Because silence prevents education, it prevents research funding, and most tragically, it prevents individuals from seeking the early medical intervention that could literally save their lives.
It really makes you realize how weaponized silence can be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't say the word out loud, you certainly can't lobby Congress for research dollars.
Exactly. And the deliberate psychological shift that the symbol engineered to combat that exact silence is just brilliant. I mean, the choice of the soft pink hue was not an accident of history.
No, it was very intentional.
Very intentional. The color was specifically selected to convey compassion, femininity, and strength. Think about the mechanics of visual semiotics.
Like how colors make us feel.
Right. If you use a harsh, aggressive color like deep red, it triggers an alarm response. It signals immediate danger or blood or stop. If you use clinical blue, it feels cold and institutional.
Like a hospital waiting room.
Exactly. By using a soft pink that feels visually approachable and emotionally resonant, the early advocates were able to take the devastating, terrifying reality of a cancer diagnosis and make it something people could look directly at without instinctively turning away. It softened the entry point for an incredibly harsh reality.
It created a visual permission slip.
Ah,
Like when you pin that ribbon to your chest, you are signaling to the world, I am open to talking about this. You are creating a safe harbor for a conversation that used to be strictly off limits.
yeah, 100%.
And that transition, going from total suffocating silence to a safe, open conversation, that paved the way for actual organization. Because you can't mobilize a secret.
No, you can't.
But once it's out in the open, the conversation naturally leads to the need for a coordinated attack plan.
And that coordination is where the grassroots whisper turns into a roar. The movement scaled up by anchoring itself to time, specifically the creation of an annual global event.
Right, October.
Exactly. The symbol became synonymous with organized awareness efforts, targeting the month of October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. From a logistical standpoint, dedicating 30 days to a single health issue is just a masterclass in behavioral conditioning.
Because it creates a focal point.
Right. It took completely disparate groups, local neighborhood nonprofits, massive multinational corporations, and these fragmented, localized healthcare organizations, and it forced them onto the exact same schedule.
It gives everyone a deadline. It forces action. And what's brilliant is how it transcends cultural boundaries. In October, whether you are in North America, Europe, or parts of Asia, the visual language is identical. You don't need to speak the local language to understand what a pink ribbon on a hospital door means.
The universal visual language is vital, but we really have to look at what that language is actually translating into. Breaking the silence was step one. But once you have the world's attention, what do you tell them?
Right, you have a microphone, now what?
Exactly. This is the crucial pivot in the history of the movement. It shifted from merely reacting to the disease, just saying, oh, this is a tragedy, to actively preventing and catching it early. It built what we can call the armor of awareness.
Which is the perfect bridge into the mechanics of what this movement actually does, because awareness is a soft word, but the instruction manual behind it is hard science.
Yes, very hard science.
Awareness isn't just a vague feeling of sympathy, it is highly specific education regarding risk factors. And for you listening, this is where the global shifts to the personal. The movement started teaching people about the variables they could control and the ones they couldn't. It brought concepts like age, genetics, lifestyle choices, and environmental influences out of the medical journals and right into the living room.
Let's actually drill down into the mechanics of those risk factors, because understanding the why is what drives behavioral change. Take genetics, for example. The awareness movement popularized the understanding of BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene mutations.
Right, you hear those terms a lot now.
You do, but what does that actually mean? BRCA genes are actually tumor suppressor genes. In a healthy body, they are like the molecular mechanics, whose entire job is to repair damaged DNA.
Okay, so they fix things.
Right. But if you inherit a mutated version of this gene, your mechanics are essentially asleep on the job. DNA damage accumulates, and the cells begin to divide uncontrollably, forming a tumor. By making the public aware of this specific mechanism, the movement empowered individuals with a family history of the disease to seek genetic testing before a tumor ever formed.
That is a staggering shift in power from the disease to the patient. And it wasn't just internal genetics, it was external warning signs too, educating people on what to physically look and feel for. Things like lumps, changes in breast shape or size, skin dimpling, and unusual discharge.
The skin dimpling is a perfect example of why specific education matters. Many people historically thought they only needed to look for a hard lump.
Right, that's what you always hear.
But biologically, if a tumor is growing deep within the breast tissue, it can pull on the Cooper's ligaments. Those are the connective tissues that shape the breast. When the tumor tethers to those ligaments, it pulls the skin inward, creating a dimple that looks almost like an orange peel.
Oh, wow.
Without the specific education driven by the pink ribbon campaigns, a patient might ignore that dimple because it doesn't fit their preconceived notion of a lump.
But let me push back on this entire concept for a second, because awareness has become such a saturated buzzword. You see a pink ribbon on a soup can, or a football player wearing pink cleats. And the cynical part of me, and probably the cynical part of anyone listening to this deep dive right now, wonders, does this actually do anything?
That's a fair question.
Does seeing a piece of pink fabric on a billboard literally alter human behavior in a way that changes medical outcomes? Or is it just passive, feel-good marketing?
That is the essential skepticism we have to address. But if you look at the mechanics of behavioral psychology, the answer is a definitive yes. We have to separate the concept of passive awareness from active cognitive triggering.
Okay, what's the difference?
A visual cue in the environment, like that pink ribbon on a billboard or on a football field, it functions as a cognitive interrupt. Most people exist in a state of optimistic denial about their health. We don't want to think about mortality. We actively delay checkup.
Guilty as charged.
Right, we all do it. The ribbon forces a disruption in that denial. When an individual who has been educated about warning signs sees that ribbon, it triggers a cascade of associations that statistically increases the likelihood they will schedule a screening.
So it is a tap on the shoulder.
More than a tap, it is
Yeah.
a prompt into a very specific medical funnel. And in the context of breast cancer, getting into that funnel promptly is the whole ballgame. Because the entire goal of this awareness is to drive people toward early detection protocols, primarily mammography, which is widely considered the gold standard for screening.
I want to spend some time on mammograms because it's a word everyone knows, but the technology is fascinating. What is a mammogram actually doing that a physical exam can't?
Well, a mammogram is utilizing low-dose X-ray technology to look inside the tissue structure. You have breast tissue, which is composed of fat, lobules, and milk ducts. A tumor is essentially a dense, chaotic cluster of rogue cells.
Okay.
X-rays pass through less dense materials like fat very easily, but they hit dense materials like tumors or microcalcifications, which are tiny flecks of calcium that can indicate early cellular changes, and they bounce off.
And that bounce is what we see.
Exactly. It leaves a white shadow on the imaging film. A mammogram is capable of detecting these dense abnormalities years before they grow large enough to be felt from the outside during a physical exam.
Which means you were fighting a localized skirmish instead of a systemic war. If you catch it when it's just a white shadow on an X-ray, the survival rates are incredibly high. The pink ribbon movement has been fundamentally instrumental in promoting these screenings, normalizing them, and stripping away the fear of the machine itself.
Normalizing the technology is half the battle. The other half is accessibility. And this highlights a deeply systemic impact of the ribbon that goes far beyond individual responsibility. Community outreach programs leverage the massive fundraising power of pink ribbon campaigns to provide free or low-cost screenings, particularly in underserved and marginalized areas.
That is a massive point. It's one thing to tell someone to go get a mammogram. It's another thing entirely if they can't afford one, or if their insurance doesn't cover it, or if they live in a rural healthcare desert where the nearest clinic is 2 hours away.
Exactly.
The awareness means nothing if the access doesn't exist.
Which is why the infrastructure behind the ribbon acts as a tool for healthcare equity. Think about the logistics of mobile mammography units. These are million-dollar, highly calibrated radiological machines retrofitted into large vehicles that can drive directly into rural communities or urban centers lacking comprehensive medical facilities.
It's amazing.
The funding generated by the awareness movement puts gas in those trucks. It pays the salaries of the radiological technicians, and it subsidizes the cost of the scans for uninsured patients. It ensures that the opportunity to benefit from early detection isn't just a privilege reserved for those with excellent healthcare plans, but a fundamental standard of care that reaches deeply into vulnerable communities.
So the ribbon is quite literally a funding mechanism for a mobile hospital pulling into your neighborhood. That is the tangible, physical result of breaking the silence, which creates a direct causal chain. Because early detection, facilitated by that equity and access, saves lives on a massive scale.
Yes, it does.
And when you save millions of lives, you create a growing, highly visible community of survivors. But survival is not just a physical state where the doctor says, you're clear. It is a deeply complex, often harrowing emotional journey.
The physical remission is only the first milestone. The medical community handles the surgical excision of the tumor or the chemical eradication of the cancer cells. But the ribbon movement has taken on the equally daunting task of addressing the psychological aftermath. Survivorship and psychological support are foundational pillars of this infrastructure.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The movement recognized early on that a disease of this magnitude attacks the mind alongside the body. When someone is sitting in a cold doctor's office and they are handed that diagnosis, the physiological stress response is immediate. Cortisol floods the system.
It's pure panic.
The emotional toll of facing one's own mortality is overwhelming. And the ribbon stands there to dismantle the absolute isolation of that exact moment. It is a visual promise that no one has to navigate that terror alone.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, survivorship stories are not just feel-good anecdotes. They are clinically valuable advocacy tools. Let's look at the mechanics of stress and illness. Chronic psychological stress actually suppresses the immune system.
So the fear physically hurts you.
Yes, a patient who feels entirely isolated and doomed is fighting a biological battle on two fronts. But when the newly diagnosed patient sees the pink ribbon and connects with a support group, they're presented with a literal roadmap. They see individuals who embody resilience. Seeing someone who has walked through the fire of chemotherapy or surgery and come out the other side provides cognitive proof that the diagnosis does not dictate a definitive end.
Wow.
It lowers the stress response, which biologically aids in recovery.
It is the ultimate proof of concept. The shared stories provide real-life, practical examples of perseverance. Like, here is how I handled the nausea. Here's how I talked to my kids about losing my hair. It emphasizes the absolute necessity of support systems. Family, friends, healthcare providers, and structured support groups. The ribbon is the unifying thread that stitches all these isolated individuals into a massive safety net.
And we see this communal safety net manifest in highly physical, energetic ways. Think about the massive events, the multi-day walks, the 5K runs, the coordinated fundraising campaigns. Logistically, yes, these are mechanisms to gather donations. But psychologically, they serve a profound purpose rooted in group dynamics.
You can almost feel the kinetic energy of those events just visualizing them. Tens of thousands of people shutting down city streets, all wearing the same color, creating a literal sea of support.
What those events do is take a struggle that is normally fought in the sterile, private confines of a hospital ward, and they turn it into a massive public celebration of collective strength. When human beings move together in a synchronized way for a shared cause, it releases a flood of endorphins and oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
It's chemically uplifting.
Exactly. It honors those who have overcome the disease while simultaneously weaving an invaluable physical network of encouragement for those currently undergoing treatment. It transforms the private trauma into a collective triumph.
It is incredibly uplifting. But, and this is a difficult transition to make, but an absolutely necessary one, while the ribbon throws these massive celebrations for survivorship, it also has to carry the immense weight of the tragic reality for those who do not survive. We have to look at how a symbol that represents fighting and winning adapts when the fight is lost.
It is perhaps one of the most poignant and complex psychological functions of the movement. How does a massively public, ubiquitous, global symbol become a deeply private, intimate artifact of mourning?
For those who have lost spouses, mothers, daughters, or friends, the pink ribbon morphs from a battle standard into a symbol of enduring love. It becomes a bridge between the specific person they are grieving and the broader movement desperately trying to prevent others from experiencing that exact same grief.
Right.
And what really stood out to me was how this global symbol gets localized for mourning. The source material specifically highlights the role of organizations that facilitate this transition, notably pointing to groups like the funeral program site.
Yes. The logistical integration of mourning into advocacy is critical. Organizations like the Funeral Program Site are highlighted as one of the largest providers of ready-to-wear and personalized awareness ribbons. This is not just a commercial service, it is a crucial psychological function within the ecosystem of the movement.
Think about the logistical and emotional reality of this. You have a family in the throes of acute, blinding grief. They are planning a celebration of life or a memorial service, which is such a raw, intensely vulnerable experience. They want to honor the fight their loved one went through, so they go to a provider like the funeral program site to order custom ribbons.
And by wearing a personalized ribbon at that service, it entirely transforms the nature of the symbol.
Exactly. You are taking this generic global icon that belongs to millions of people, and through customization, you are shrinking it down into a highly specific, intimate tribute that belongs only to one unique human being.
The emotional utility of that customization is profound. When we look at the psychology of grief, humans have an innate need for tangible artifacts. When you are processing profound, invisible emotional pain, having a physical object to anchor those emotions is a documented psychological necessity.
It grounds you.
It gives the grief a physical location. By allowing families to add names, specific dates, or personal messages to the ribbon, organizations provide families with that vital, physical keepsake.
It is quite literally a physical artifact of their grief that they can pin over their heart.
Exactly. But what makes this specific artifact so unique is its dual utility. A personalized pink ribbon allows families to channel their intensely private grief directly into the broader awareness movement. They're keeping the memory of their loved one alive, but they are doing it through a medium that inherently advocates for the lives of strangers. It says, "We lost her, but we are still in the fight for you."
For you listening, consider how we all process the loss of someone we love. The immediate instinct is to find a way to make their memory mean something, to ensure the world doesn't just spin on and forget them. The fact that public symbols can be adapted for private memorialization, guided by the infrastructure of providers like the funeral program site, shows how the movement provides profound comfort in our darkest moments. It ensures that each tribute is both heartfelt and fiercely purposeful.
It highlights the incredible dual nature of the ribbon. In one context, it waves like a flag at a massive charity run with 50,000 people. In another, it sits quietly pinned to a lapel at a quiet memorial service. That deeply personal, emotional resonance is exactly what made the symbol universally recognizable.
Yeah.
But as with any symbol that touches millions of hearts and achieves global recognition, it inevitably intersected with the global corporate and political spheres. Which brings us to a very complex reality, the double-edged sword of global impact.
Right, because once a symbol commands the attention of the entire global public, it is going to attract billions of dollars. We have to talk about the financial mechanics. Corporate partnerships have played an astronomically huge role in amplifying the reach of the ribbon. We are talking about incorporating the symbol into products, massive marketing efforts, and pledging portions of the proceeds directly to research and advocacy.
The scale of the financial infrastructure is staggering. We often use the term awareness, but functionally, the pink ribbon has created something akin to a venture capital ecosystem for medical research. From local community bake sales to massive international corporate campaigns, the funds raised dictate the pace of scientific discovery.
Because research is expensive.
Unbelievably expensive. Without this capital, clinical trials stall, laboratories shut down, and progress halts. But, and this is a massive caveat, while these partnerships exponentially increase visibility and funding, they also necessitate a brutal level of transparency and accountability.
And this is where the public pushback comes in, and rightly so. The concept of pinkwashing is a real concern. If I walk into a grocery store in October, I might see a pink ribbon on a yogurt lid, a pack of batteries, or a power drill. And the immediate question is, how do we ensure the money actually helps?
Right, where is it going?
Exactly. How do we know a corporation isn't just slapping a pink ribbon on a product to boost their own sales while funneling pennies to actual research?
It's a completely valid critique, and watchdogging is a necessary component of the movement's maturation. The ecosystem requires critical thinking and active vetting from the public. We have to look at the accountability structures of these campaigns. If a company claims a portion of proceeds goes to awareness, what does that actually mean legally? Does the money go directly to a research lab studying immunotherapy? Does it fund the mobile mammogram units we discussed earlier? Or does it just go to an administrative fund that pays for more marketing?
Which defeats the purpose.
Completely. The ribbon is the most powerful fundraising tool in medical history, but it requires vigilant stewardship to ensure the corporate intent matches the medical outcome.
It's about ensuring the awareness translates into tangible action and aggressive policy change. Because it's not just about finding test tubes, it's about lobbying governments. The capital raised by the ribbon has been a driving force behind advocacy efforts to improve systemic healthcare policies. Lobbying Congress to mandate insurance coverage for early screenings, protecting patients from being denied coverage due to pre-existing conditions, and securing billions in federal funding for cancer research institutions.
And we cannot limit our perspective to heavily corporatized Western nations. The global impact of the ribbon is arguably most critical in low- and middle-income countries. International health organizations utilize the pink ribbon as a universal language to address terrifying disparities in global healthcare.
How does that actually work on the ground? Like, if you are in a region that doesn't have the infrastructure for a $1 million mobile mammogram unit, what does the pink ribbon do?
It strips the protocol down to its most fundamental, accessible parts. In regions lacking radiological infrastructure, the movement focuses heavily on education around clinical breast exams and self-examinations. It trains local healthcare workers in rural villages to perform these physical exams and recognize the early physiological warning signs.
So empowers the local community.
Yes, and it establishes referral pathways, so that if an abnormality is found, the patient has a route to a centralized hospital for surgical or chemical intervention. The ribbon acts as a unifying emblem to foster cooperation between international NGOs and local governments, trying to elevate the baseline standard of care in places that have historically lacked resources.
That is incredible. It proves that its power goes far, far beyond Western corporate marketing campaigns. It is a literal lifeline fostering cooperation on a global scale. And all of this, the global advocacy, the intense demand for corporate transparency and funding, the psychological support networks, it is all ultimately pointing toward one singular monumental goal: the future horizon, the absolute eradication of the disease.
Everything we have discussed is merely the scaffolding supporting the science. The ultimate goal of the entire movement is to render itself obsolete through a cure. And the scientific advancements funded by this movement over the last few decades are nothing short of revolutionary. We are moving rapidly away from historical treatments and entering an era of precision medicine.
Let's look at where the science is actually taking us, because the historical approach to treating this disease was, for lack of a better word, brutal.
It was.
It was a scorched earth policy. You bombard the entire body with toxic chemotherapy or aggressive radiation, hoping you kill the cancer cells before you kill the healthy cells. But the funds raised by the ribbon have led to vastly improved diagnostic tools and targeted therapies. Let's break down the two big ones: immunotherapy and hormone therapy.
To understand how massive a leap forward this is, we have to look at cellular biology. The reason cancer is so deadly is that it originates from our own cells. It is not an alien invader like a virus or a bacteria. It is your own DNA that is mutated. Because of this, the human immune system, which is designed to attack foreign invaders, often has a blind spot.
It just doesn't see it.
Doesn't recognize the cancer cells as a threat. They wear a sort of biological invisibility cloak.
That is terrifying, but it makes perfect sense why the body doesn't fight back automatically.
Precisely. Immunotherapy is a cutting-edge treatment designed to strip away that invisibility cloak. Researchers are developing what are called checkpoint inhibitors. Basically, they introduce drugs that block the proteins cancer cells use to hide, effectively flagging the tumor.
And painting a target on it.
Exactly. Once flagged, the patient's own T cells, the foot soldiers of the immune system, can suddenly see the cancer and are empowered to attack and destroy the rogue cells naturally. We are reprogramming the body to cure itself.
That is science fiction becoming reality. You aren't poisoning the body, you are giving the immune system the exact coordinates of the enemy. And hormone therapy takes a similarly targeted approach, right?
Yes, but through a different mechanism. This raises an important question about how tumors feed. Certain types of breast cancer are hormone receptor positive, meaning they use the body's natural hormones like estrogen or progesterone as fuel to grow and multiply. The tumor cells literally have receptors on their surface that catch estrogen molecules.
Okay, so how do you stop that?
Hormone therapy utilizes drugs like selective estrogen receptor modulators that act as decoys. They lock into the receptors on the cancer cells, blocking the actual estrogen from attaching. You are essentially starving the tumor of its primary food source on a molecular level.
It is highly personalized, microscopic combat. They are looking at the specific genetic and molecular makeup of a single patient's tumor and tailoring the weapon to match it perfectly. But, scientific breakthroughs only matter if the patient can actually get the treatment. Which brings us to the technological evolution of the movement itself.
This raises an important question regarding the future logistics of the pink ribbon. How do you deliver molecular-level precision medicine to a global population? The answer lies in the integration of digital platforms, data-driven research, and crucially, telemedicine.
Telemedicine feels like the great equalizer here. If the primary goals are awareness, early detection, and personalized treatment, telemedicine bypasses the geographical barriers. You might live in a rural community and not have a specialized oncologist within 300 miles. But with telemedicine, you can have a high-definition video consultation with a leading expert.
And it goes deeper than just video calls. We're talking about digital pathology. A local surgeon can perform a biopsy in a rural clinic, digitize the cellular slides on a scanner, and instantly transmit those high-resolution images to a laboratory halfway across the world. An expert pathologist can analyze the cells, determine if they are hormone receptor positive, and recommend a targeted therapy plan within hours instead of weeks.
That speed is life-saving.
Furthermore, the movement is leveraging massive global data pools. When millions of patients share their genetic profiles, their specific tumor types, and their responses to targeted therapies, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms can analyze that data to spot patterns invisible to the human eye.
Wow, so the data itself is a weapon.
Yes. This data-driven research speeds up the discovery of new drug combinations exponentially. The pink ribbon has evolved from a symbol of awareness into a symbol of this relentless, hyper-connected commitment to technological and scientific progress.
So, what does this all mean? We have covered an immense amount of ground today, peeling back the layers of something we see every single day. Let's recap the incredible journey of this looped piece of fabric. We saw how it started as a desperate attempt to break the dangerous, suffocating silence of a highly stigmatized disease. It was the key to unlocking the dark room of medical isolation.
From there, it became the economic and educational engine driving the gold standard of early detection. It taught the global public the intricate biology of risk factors, and it demanded equitable, on-the-ground access to life-saving screening technologies like mammography.
It became an emotional unifier, offering profound psychological support. It created a massive, highly visible global community of survivors whose very existence proves that a diagnosis is not an automatic death sentence. And we saw how deeply adaptable the symbol is, holding space for our deepest sorrows. It provides personalized, tangible comfort through memorial keepsakes, facilitated by the vital logistical support of providers like the funeral program site, allowing families to honor their loved ones intimately while continuing the fight.
And finally, we saw how the billions of dollars raised, aggressively monitored for transparency, have constructed a venture capital ecosystem for science. It is funding the molecular combat of immunotherapy, the precision of hormone starvation, and the global reach of digital telemedicine, pushing us tangibly closer to a world where this disease is no longer a terminal threat.
It really is a call to action. For you listening right now, let the ubiquity of the pink ribbon serve as a deeply personal prompt. Let it be the cognitive interrupt that causes you to schedule the screening you've been putting off. Let it be the reason you understand your own genetic history, check on a loved one who's fighting, or support a survivor in your community, because knowledge is incredibly powerful. But action is the only thing that actually changes the outcome.
The infrastructure behind the pink ribbon is a testament to what the human race can achieve when it focuses its collective empathy, its financial resources, and its scientific brilliance on a single vital problem.
We want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. We've spent this entire deep dive unpacking the incredible power, the massive global infrastructure, and the deep emotional resonance of the pink ribbon. It is an ecosystem that employs millions, raises billions, and unites the globe. But consider this, the ultimate goal of every single person wearing, selling, or advocating with this symbol is to reach a day where it is absolutely no longer needed. What happens to this massive, unified global community, this incredible, finely tuned network of human empathy and medical science on the day we finally cure this disease and put the pink ribbon away for good. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.